Ukraine is reaching a dangerous point as Russia is bracing with deployment of nukes. On the other hand, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Australia has deepened India-Australia strategic alignment, and US has a new contender in the presidential race to the White House. A very warm welcome to World 360. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. First up are the headlines. Russia to deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. The Belarusian president confirms, says the warheads are already on the move. In the Kremlin's first ever deployment of such bombs outside Russia. After Ukraine, Chinese envoy Li Hui meets Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Can China remain impartial on Russia-Ukraine after deepening trade ties amid surge in trade with Russia? With just 1 week to go until the United States could hit its credit limit and start defaulting on its debts, credit ratings agency Fitch warns it may downgrade US credit rating, driving up costs. And Sunday will be the first time Turkish voters have ever had to go to the ballot box for a second time to select their next president, majorly to be decided by expats and quick victims. First, it was the G7 in Japan's Hiroshima, the Quad on the sidelines, and the visit to Papua New Guinea. Finally, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's six-day three-nation tour ended in Australia. It was a visit full of bilaterals and bonhomie. Prime Minister Modi was accorded with the Ceremonial Guard of Honour at the Admiralty House in Sydney, which is where the bilateral also took place. They spoke about boosting regional, cultural and even economic ties. Beyond this, they also spoke about the Quad, the Russia-Ukraine war and the attacks on temples in Australia that have been witnessed in the country over the last few months. Prime Minister Modi thanked Prime Minister Albanese for the strict action being taken and said that anti-social elements will not be tolerated. There was a mega diaspora event organised by the Indian Australian Diaspora Foundation. There were instrumental performances, traditional dances and a lot more. Albanese called Narendra Modi a boss and said that even Bruce Springsteen did not receive the kind of welcome that the Indian Prime Minister got. Now, Prime Minister Modi said that India-Australia ties are in T20 mode. He also extended an invitation to Albanese to watch the Cricket World Cup in India and to take part in India's Diwali celebrations. It was a trip that boosted ties on a multi-level basis.
फ्रेंड्स, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में मंदिरों पर होने वाले हमलों और अलगाववादी तत्वों की गतिविधियों के संबंध में हमने पहले भी बात की थी और आज भी हमने बात की है। भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के सौहार्दपूर्ण रिश्तों को कोई भी तत्व अपने विचारों या अपने एक्शन से आघात पहुंचाए, ये हमें स्वीकार्य नहीं है। प्रधानमंत्री अल्बनीजी ने इस संदर्भ में जो कदम उठाए हैं, मैं इसके लिए उनको धन्यवाद देता हूं। साथ ही उन्होंने मुझे एक बार फिर आश्वस्त किया है कि वो ऐसे तत्वों के विरुद्ध सख्त एक्शन लेते रहेंगे।
It is a huge pleasure to welcome Prime Minister Modi to Australia. In just my first year as Prime Minister, which I'm celebrating today, I have met the Prime Minister, my friend, 6 times. And what a joy it is to get to welcome Prime Minister Modi here with all of you. I said to my friend, the Prime Minister, before, the last time I saw someone on the stage here was Bruce Springsteen, and he didn't get the welcome that Prime Minister Modi has got. Prime Minister Modi is the boss.
There are also concerns about extremist elements, secessionist elements. Prime Minister did speak about it in his joint statement today. You think that's going to be addressed, Billy?
Well, I'd say this, and I've made this really clear. We guard our multiculturalism fiercely in Australia. We and we guard the social cohesion which underpins that. You know, we are one of the most multicultural societies in the world, and the social cohesion and the values which underpin that matter to us. That's why there is no space for hate and bigotry, and there is no space for violence. And you know, we've had an appropriate security response to the violence against religious places, including Hindu temples, and that is to be condemned. And what we would say is there is no place for that in Australia. We do. People have a right to peaceful protest. That is something Australians expect. But there is a line, and we do not want people to cross it, and if that is crossed, then obviously the law will respond.
No, I respect that. Vandalism, violence, protest is one aspect. Hate is another aspect.
Yes.
But the messaging is now secessionist. So that's where the concern is. Is the government, Australian government?
Well, as I've said, I mean the so-called, you know, the protest which was held, the so-called referendum is simply a protest. It has no effect and ought to be dismissed in terms of any effect. So I mean, I don't even want to talk about the territorial integrity of India because it seems to sort of give weight to something which has no weight.
How has Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit panned out? Let's try and get in a sense of perspective. And for that, I'm joined in by Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, who's a former senior diplomat. Many thanks to you, Ambassador. It's also important to talk about how this relationship between India and Australia has in fact grown in the years, especially under Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As the former High Commissioner to Australia, how have you seen the change happen?
Let's say, you know, having been in Australia now for almost 4 years as High Commissioner, what I can tell you is that in the early days, Australia did not look at us for almost 10, 15 years. And they kept looking at ASEAN, which is the Southeast Asian countries. So the bulk of the immigration then was from these countries. And very frankly, they did not perform to the expectation of the Australians. That's my reading anyway. And therefore, as relations with India improved, and India became more and more drawn into the Western alliances and particularly Quad and so on and so forth. And now the Prime Minister of India invited to a G7 meeting, which is a rare honor for any outsider. They realize that we are now a serious partner in facing up, let me be very clear, to Chinese assertiveness in this whole Indo-Pacific region. Therefore, what they've done is they've been reviewing their policies.
Right.
They were very worked up about our nuclear tests, and I told them, that's our business when I was there. But those things are all behind us now. And also Albanese is finding, as I said, the immigrants from India with their knowledge of English and so on and so forth, and especially the young students, fit in much more easily into Australian society than the Southeast Asians do. And that is the Commonwealth link, a historical link.
Right. Many thanks to you, Ambassador Parthasarathy. I was only hoping that also translates into a better strategic alignment as far as the Indo-Pacific and China's influence, countering that influence of China is concerned. Many thanks to you, Ambassador, for joining in on World 360. Now, after technical glitches delayed the start by 25 minutes, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis finally announced on Twitter's audio platform that he's running for US presidency. This, of course, setting up a clash with the current Republican primary frontrunner, former President Donald Trump. DeSantis, in his opening address to listeners, painted a dark picture of the country, saying that it is going in the wrong direction under Biden and urged Republicans to get behind him. DeSantis' decision to effectively share a stage with Musk, who purchased Twitter last year, was an unusual choice for a presidential aspirant. It spoke to his desire to win over right-wing activists that are increasingly prevalent on the side. But the technical failure at the top of the planned conversation set off a wave of mockery from Ron DeSantis' rivals. Here's a report.
Our Florida Governor Ron DeSantis officially joined the race for the U.S. presidency on Wednesday. He released his first campaign video setting up a direct confrontation in the Republican contest with his one-time ally, former President Donald Trump.
And I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
However, the rest of the launch did not go smoothly. Twitter crashed repeatedly during a highly anticipated live audio chat between DeSantis and Twitter CEO Elon Musk.
Put his money where his mouth is, upset the narrative control imposed on.
The audio cut out and some users were dropped. At one point, it appeared that over 500,000 people tried to join. Elon Musk blamed the problems on the number of listeners on Twitter Spaces.
Right, we're just reallocating more server capability to be able to handle the load here. It's really going crazy.
The same service handled 3 million listeners for Musk's interview with the BBC last month. Twitter outages have become more common under Musk's ownership, as he laid off thousands of staff, including software engineers. Former President Donald Trump was gleeful over DeSantis' shaky Twitter launch, posting on his Truth Social account, "It was a disaster." In the months leading up to his presidential bid, DeSantis has toured the country, visiting states such as Iowa and New Hampshire that will hold early nominating contests, boasting of his record as Florida's governor.
We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Our state is where woke goes to die.
Which includes severely restricting abortions in the state and making it easier for residents to carry concealed weapons. He also kept up a protracted battle with Disney over its criticism of laws that banned the teaching of gender identity concepts in public schools. But DeSantis' decision to wait to enter the race may have cost him in the polls, as Trump has had ample time and space to attack DeSantis, while some allies may have grown frustrated, waiting for the Florida governor to step into the ring. Besides DeSantis and Trump, other declared Republican candidates include Nikki Haley, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and Tim Scott, a U.S. senator from South Carolina.
Of America!
So what's the view like within the Democrats and the Republicans? Let's try and get in a sense from both ends of the spectrum. And for that, I'm joined in by Corinne Clark, who's a Republican strategist, and Crystal Knight, who's a Democrat strategist. Both of them are joining me live right now. Many thanks to you, Crystal and Corinne. Corinne, if I could begin with you. Now, the pro-Trump groups for Make America Great Again, who are slamming this campaign launch already, calling it out of touch, are, of course, having a field day, as is Donald Trump with DeSantis' flop announcement on Twitter. How will such a launch play out with anti and pro-Trump supporters?
I saw that Trump responded immediately and said Ron DeSantis will run the country similarly to how he's running this campaign launch, which I thought was a pretty good burn. I think the campaign launch could have been a lot stronger. I do appreciate when presidential candidates try to utilize technology and try to be in touch with a younger generation. But interestingly enough, Ron DeSantis used this new platform with all of its glitches, and he used it exactly like he would have used any other platform that exists without glitches. He could have given this speech to Newsmax and got 10 million viewers. It was a canned, rehearsed soundbite. He could have given that exact same speech, had that exact conversation on a cable news network with 20 times the viewership and zero problems. So I think it was a flop. They had no contingency plan, and now we have a lot to make fun of that we didn't the day before. So bad news for him.
Fair enough. Crystal, let's also talk about the way Ron DeSantis has been politically posturing himself. He's trying to posture himself as someone being right of even someone like Donald Trump, that too on issues like abortion, even guns and immigration. How far can that work in the presidential race for DeSantis?
Absolutely not. Those are wildly unpopular policies across his home state, and they're unpopular across the country. When you think about what happened in the 2022 midterm elections with abortion, that is what propelled Democrats actually to do much better than what we projected or what we thought, particularly in states like Kansas and Michigan. And I don't see Ron DeSantis winning in those states. When we talk about immigration and the bills that he just signed, they're not only anti-immigrant, they're anti-human. They're akin to having codes, people being stopped on the street and checked for their, legality, which is something that we don't do in this country. And we think about the anti-DEI, the anti-education bills that he's passed. Again, these are not popular policies. He's only able to get away with this because he's the governor of the state of Florida. And so if Ron DeSantis believes that he will, move out into a general primary or a presidential primary, touting the things that he's done in Florida, understanding that the American electorate does not believe in these things, he is destined to fail as soon as he gets started.
All right. Many thanks to you, Corinne and Crystal, for joining in with those precious inputs. And with that, let me shift focus over to the war in Ukraine. While Russia is now bracing to, in fact, deploy nukes in Belarus, here's more in the war. As far as the war is concerned, the chief of Russia's Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has confirmed that the mercenary group has started withdrawing fighters from the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. The announcement comes days after he claimed full control of the war-ravaged city. Of course, Kyiv disputes this assertion. Prigozhin, a Putin ally who has clashed with Russia's defense ministry throughout its 15-month invasion of Ukraine, has said that most Wagner mercenaries will move to field camps by next Thursday. The 3-minute footage shows Prigozhin walking across the deserted town, instructing his mercenaries, as you can see on the right side of your screen. At one point, he carries on with his speech against the sound of a loud explosion in the background. Listen in to what Prigozhin says.
We are withdrawing units from Bakhmut today. It is now 5 hours on 25th of May. Until June the 1st, the main part will be relocated to rear camps. We are handing over the military positions, ammunition, everything including dry ration to the military.
Военным боекомплект, позиции, все, включая сухой паёк.
While Bakhmut seems to have fallen to Russia, there seems to be fresh confusion over Ukraine's counter-offensive. Many security analysts believe that the counter-offensive has already begun. Here's why I say so. A group of anti-Putin Russian nationals who are aligned with the Ukrainian army have claimed responsibility for an attack in Russia's southwestern region of Belgorod. This region borders northeastern Ukraine. 2 areas of the region were then hit by unmanned aerial vehicles, causing 2 houses to catch fire. While one civilian from a village has died due to cross-border fighting, about 100 others were evacuated from the Russian border settlements in Belgorod. The attack has arrived as a rude shock, giving the world dramatic images of Russian nationals actively taking up arms against the Kremlin. Smoke was also seen rising from apparent explosions. Local authorities have confirmed what they described as 2 drone strikes. Which groups are involved? On Telegram, the Freedom for Russia Legion said that this group and another group, the Russian Volunteer Corps, continue to liberate the Belgorod region. This post described the groups as patriot volunteers. Let's listen in to what Russia's defense minister has to say.
On May 22nd of this year, a unit of Ukrainian nationalist formation invaded the territory of Russian Federation in the area of international checkpoint Kozinka in the Belgorod region. In the course of counter-terrorist operation, the nationalist formations were blocked and defeated by airstrikes, artillery fire and the active actions of the cover units of the state border of the Western Military District. The remnants of the nationalists were driven back to the territory of Ukraine, when they continued to be hit by fire until they were completely eliminated.
And
so where has this war reached? It seems like a very dangerous point, with the counter-offensive already begun and Russia all set to deploy nukes. Let's try and get in a sense of perspective, and for that I'm joined in by Ben Aris, who's the editor-in-chief of BNE and former Moscow bureau chief of Daily Telegraph. Thank you, Ben, for joining in. Now, we know soldiers are to be rotated and have to be rested out, but whatever Prigozhin is saying, is that claim a validation of victory over Bakhmut?
It seems pretty clear at this point that Bakhmut has fallen, in so much as the Institute for Studies of War reported this morning that they have seen no fighting going on in the city for the first time since December. However, of course, fog of war, everything's a little confusing. So the Ukrainians have denied this. They say fighting's going on continuously and that they have a toehold. But even the Ukrainians have downgraded somewhat their description of their presence in the city. And given that the Wagner people are rotating out and there are plenty of reports of regular Russian troops being put in, artillery units being brought up, it does seem like, the fight for Bakhmut is over, or at least in the sense that the Ukrainians have lost control of the city and that the Russians are now in control, which is a huge propaganda gain for the Kremlin. I mean, they needed a victory. They haven't had a victory for months and months. This fight's been going on for 8 months, and finally it's come to some sort of conclusion.
Going by an interview given by the Wagner chief, he's in fact warned that the war may end with the Russian Revolution. What's happened in Belgorod also goes on to indicate there's anti-Kremlin sentiment within Russia. How is Belgorod now going to play out with that anti-Kremlin sentiment?
Yes and yes. It plays out. People are concerned. The people we've talked to in Belgorod Oblast, where this attack happened, they lost a village yesterday with these insurgents, these militias that crossed the border and took briefly control of the town. But they didn't hold it for more than a day, and they've been driven out. The Russians brought up heavy artillery troops and attacked them. There were 70 fighters, and they fled back across. They fled back across the border into Ukraine. However, the timing of it, I think, is significant that given that Kiev had just lost control of Bakhmut and took a propaganda hit or a media hit with that, then they've launched this spectacular attack into Russia proper, the first one, the largest scale attack on Russian territory, and taken this town in some way to, offset the bad news from Bakhmut. But the people there, they're concerned. They have been concerned for quite a while about the war spilling over into Russia, but they're not panicking. It seems that the Russians are now back in control of that region, of the Belgorod region, and that they're coming with their own propaganda saying that, we're going to beef up security, we're going to beef up the border, we're going to put in more troops, and we're still in charge. And look, the Ukrainians are now attacking Mother Russia. So they're trying to turn it to their own advantage propaganda-wise in order to inflame the people to actually join the army and fight.
All right, we'll leave it at that for now. Many thanks to you, Ben. It'll be interesting to see how this pans out next week. I'm sure it'll be a defining week. And with that, it's time to slip into a quick break. Don't go anywhere because we have the latest on the US economy, which could be impacting the world as well. Stay tuned.